Hey y'all, Comrade Gunpla here with a different topic to talk about today. Okay, holiday seasons are coming up, and more importantly, my partner's birthday is also coming up, so I gotta get her something. Now, as a maker myself, I've never had to actually buy her anything. Last year, I made her Final Fantasy XIV character into a custom figure as a gift, which actually ended up kickstarting my little figure side hustle. Once the bar was set that high, it's kind of difficult to follow that up, right? Like, I can't just retreat back to a regular gift this year. Now, the idea came to me. My girlfriend has been absolutely obsessed with Elden Ring in the past 2 years, whereas I'm the type of person who can't even focus enough to finish most games. She actually is only into just a handful of games. Final Fantasy XIV, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3 now, and this farming mobile game on her phone. Within Elden Ring, she's also only really into Ranni the Witch. While I like Souls games for their kind of a dark dystopian vibes, for her, this is a Ranni game. The Ranni ending is the only ending she's interested in. The Ranni storyline is the only thing she's excited about. The way she plays is basically to advance to the next Ranni part. So naturally, I had to look up Ranni the Witch 3D figures, and I came across this figure designer named Nom Nom Figures. I really like their styles. It's kind of a blend between the more cartoonish look and the more serious North American European RPG look, so it's not too cartoony, but also not too grim. By signing up to their Patreon, you get like 5 figure files per month, plus all the files from the previous month. I left their link below if you're interested. Anyways, they got this absolutely gorgeous Ranni the Witch file. I honestly think this might look even better than official merch. It's got, I don't know, just a lot more of a better capture of the vibe of Ranni, right? And especially with the little hand, with the ring very much pronounced. I feel like there's a lot more of the lore built into the figure. By the time this video makes it out there, it should already be about Thanksgiving, since I want your sweet views while you're stuck at home. Resin 3D printing is getting really good, and with the abundance of either free 3D models or really good 3D figure designers out there, this is a great time to grab a 3D printer on the cheap. Right now, I really recommend the Creality Hallett Mage. It's going for only about a bit more than $200 right now, and the value is unmatched. Really big print area, the flip up hood is nice, there is a carbon filter included in the machine with a hose sticking out so you can conveniently leave it outside the window for, pumping fume out. The only downside is it is a lot slower than my smaller machines, and without tweaking, I am getting about a 10% failure rate on my prints, but that's not really a huge deal. Anyways, here's the Ranni figure all printed and assembled. This is sized up by 50%, so it's absolutely huge, but as you already knew in the thumbnail, we're not going to be doing this today. Nom Nom Figures also released this Chibi version of Ranni, and since I've never dealt with something in this caliber, I wanted to practice first on something easier, so we're building this Chibi version today, just so I can get my techniques and colors right. Nom Nom Figures releases 2 Chibi files per month, and this is a great way to dip your toes into the world of resin prints. Alright, that's probably enough free promo, let's get to the prep work. So with the nature of 3D printing, your figure is going to have a fair bit of surfaces to sand and support nubs to fill, and resin dust is toxic, so I usually do this at my paint booth with a mask, of course, which we all should have a couple left over from COVID still. To make things easier, I have this electric sander I use from Microlux with this bit of sanding sponge, double-sided taped on top. First pass, I'm just going at the part roughly, picking out easy to sand surfaces until layer lines aren't clearly visible anymore. Sometimes you'll see a couple of nubs left from the support pieces, which I pick out with a knife or nippers first so I can sand less later. Just make sure if you're using nippers, you don't use your precious god hands because you'll snap those real quick. I got these wire cutters on Amazon for like 20 bucks for 5 of them. Sometimes you're gonna have support nubs that are missing a bit of material. White super glue is perfect for fixing this. A little bit of activator and we can get to sanding right away. After this, I prime the part so I can see the remaining imperfections better. Primer can also act as kind of a gap filler, right? It'll smooth over a lot of the layer lines. As you can see after priming, you can see these imperfect bits a lot clearer. A few rounds of priming and sanding and I got this all fixed up. Surface prep on a 3D model can be a lot more work than scale model kits from an actual manufacturer, but this is absolutely necessary to get a good result. This model also comes with this second face, which I printed in clear, but as you can see after curing, it now got this almost frosty look, which is kind of cool, but I want this piece to be fully see-through so you can see Ranni's face underneath. Now, basic painting concepts here. How clear or reflective a surface is entirely based on how smooth the surface is. Basically, a smooth surface reflects light uniformly, whereas a rough surface bounces lights off to create more of a matte look. That means we need to smooth out the surface as much as possible, which I'll be doing with a gloss clear coat first, sprayed on really wet so it'll smooth out on its own while drying. As you can see, immediately there is a day and night difference. After sanding with really high grit sanding sponge, I believe I went up all the way to 3000 grit here. It turned back into the frostier look, but we know we have a much more uniform base to work with here. Another coat of gloss clear, and as you can see, you can pretty much see everything underneath. After that, I did a clear blue coat, but I honestly don't know if I like it that much. I feel like it's a little too blue. But that's what this build is all about, right? This is a test, so I know what to do or not to do on the big figure later. We'll make this even more clear by buffing it out with this MadWorks polishing compound and polishing wheel set. This stuff comes in 3 grits. I started out with the coarse grit, already a huge difference. After all 3 grits, you can definitely see everything behind this part. For the terrain, I'm going to do a shaded paint. First by painting the whole thing in black. Then with a thin white, I applied highlights for pre-shading. Finally, I went over the entire part with a thin down gray. After that, we need to do a bit of dry brushing with acrylic paint to pick out all the raised details. Here I'm just getting a bit of light gray with my beat up flat brush, getting rid of most of the paint on a piece of tissue, and going at the edges. After this, you can see all the edges a lot better. Now, this is when I felt like the details are a bit too intrusive, so I did another thin gray coat to subdue that a bit, which you'll see later was kind of a mistake. To add some more depth to the colors, I applied a brown weathering wash and removed most of it with mineral spirits after it dried. Unfortunately, after the gray coat and the wash, you can barely see the dry brushing. I tried going over the entire part with a bit more dry brushing, but it's just not as impressive as before. I think if I skipped the thin gray coat before the wash, this would have been a lot better. 2 layers of filtering were just a bit much. Time for the actual star, the Ranni figure itself. I'm using the primer gray as the base and just apply the white highlights right on top of the primer. After that, I applied a thin layer of light blue, which I mixed with a little bit of red to balance out the warmth. The masking work was an absolute nightmare. I do have masking putty on hand and masking liquids, but I don't know, being a Gunpla builder and all for the most part, I kind of have this weird standard for using tape as much as possible, which is making this a lot harder on my part. Anyways, I did the rest of the main colors with my shading technique, nothing to write home about. Ranni's entire character has this bluish hue, so I went over the entire model with a coat of very thinned down, very clear blue at the end. In order to make your clear colors less opaque, you just add more gloss clear top coat to it. After that, I thought the face looked a little too blue, so I did a bit of a white highlighting to it, which I forgot to film, but you can see later that the final color looks a bit lighter. Now, time for probably the most important part of it all, the eyes. Or in this case, the one eye. Only having one eye to do definitely makes this much easier. You might think painting eyes is all about accuracy, which it's not exactly the case. You see, painting eyes is all about having a way to fix your mistakes, which I'll be doing with enamel paint. What I'm doing here is kind of a stripped down version of Tsukima Sangyo's painting techniques. If you want to seriously get into resin figures, definitely go check him out. My process skips over quite a lot of steps from his, which makes mine not look nearly as good, but good enough for my skill level. First, I'm filling the eye with enamel white. After that, I try my best to outline the eye with enamel black, which I obviously messed up big time, partially because I can only really accurately paint stuff when I have the part like 2 inches in front of my face. And in order to film this, I actually had to hold this part out like a foot away from my face, but that's fine. With this little flathead sponge swab, every brand calls this a different thing. I know you can get the Gaia one on either Amazon or New Type right now. I dipped a bit of mineral spirits and erased the excess to shape this into what I wanted. Since I painted the figure with lacquer paint, this enamel paint and thinner won't actually dissolve the paint underneath, as they have different solvent properties. So no matter how bad you may be at this, after a few times of going back and forth, you'll absolutely get acceptable results. And now the iris is where I really cut out significant chunks of the work. The proper technique is supposed to be sealing what you've already done with a gloss clear lacquer top coat, and continue painting on top of that with enamel so you can erase on top of the eyes if you messed up. But I'm too lazy for that, so I'm just busting out my acrylic paints, which is another different solvent property and a lot harder to erase, but you can still kind of do it with acrylic thinner, which won't affect both the enamel and lacquer coats underneath. A couple of downsides in addition to the fact that it's harder to erase. First of all, acrylic paints can seem kind of dull compared to enamel paints. And secondly, with enamel paints, you can use clear colors instead of solid colors to give the eyes a bit more of a translucent look. But I didn't have any clear enamel colors on hand, so I won't be even making a difference with that. After painting the eyes with a gradient of 3 shades of blues, we're starting to see a bit of life in this figure. I filled the pupil in with some black, and time for arguably the most important step here, a bit of white as the reflective spot. You can really go as creative as you want with the eyes. For example, in Oshinoko, you got these star pupils for a very unique look, so you can definitely do that if you want to, right? I'm just going with a very standard look here. After that, I seal the eyes with a bit of acrylic gloss varnish to keep that shiny look in the eye. Time for the matte top coat, but I didn't really want to get it on the glossy eye, so I masked it with a bit of masking putty. That's about it for this entire figure. Time to take a look at the final result. Hopefully that was an informative video. As you can see, it's not terribly hard to get into resin figures, and this is honestly a great way to always have a super unique gifts for your loved ones. Like, comment, and subscribe if you liked the video. I'll see you in the next one.